This is an episode we were going to do last week, but it ends up working out because even more information is coming on this Bryce Huff situation. We're going to give you the latest on Bryce Huff, plus explain that a tag and trade scenario isn't as uncommon as you think. We'll actually provide several details. Let's roll.
Zoinks! It is unequivocally the Super Bowl for New York Jet fans.
Field Yates, baby. Field gosh darn Yates. Let's bring him on the show.
Come on, people. Connor Rogers is joining the show. What's up, Connor? But Trevor gosh darn Sycamore, baby, for me, personally, my favorite New York Jet of all time.
Wow, it's great to be on. What an intro that was right there.
Paul, nobody does an intro like you, man.
Paul, you give the best intro of literally any podcast that I've ever.
I'm gonna lose my gosh darn bananas.
Good morning, everybody. Paul Weston Jr., a.k.a. Boy Green. I'm the New York Jets digital reporter for Heavy.com, This is Boy Green Daily, a daily New York Jets video show, also available wherever you get your podcast. Simply search for Boy Green Daily. We're streaming live on Heavy on Jets, my YouTube channel, youtube.com/BoyGreen25. Make sure you guys like the video, hit subscribe, and on Twitter as well. I'm going to be honest, I'm struggling here with this Bryce Huff conversation, because my heart says I don't want to lose Bryce Huff. He's 25 years old. He was an undrafted free agent. The Jets did a magnificent job developing this young man into the dynamic pass rusher that he is. Double-digit sack season in his contract year. Awesome, all across the board. My brain says, hey, Paul, this is what the Jets set up for. They drafted Will McDonald with the 15th overall pick, and he is the chosen one to take the torch from Bryce Huff. That's why you use the 15th overall pick on him in the first place. So my brain is telling me one thing, but my heart is telling me something else, that I want Bryce Huff as a part of this team, because I'm going to be honest, I feel like we are going to be robbed, because I will tell you, as we're going to give you all the details here, that I am leaning on what I believe is going to happen, not what I want is going to happen, what I believe is going to happen, that Bryce Huff is not going to be a member of this team next year. That's my gut right now at this point. And again, we'll give you all the information, but my gut says that we're not going to have Bryce Huff next year, which is a damn shame, because Aaron Rodgers is coming back next year. The Jets are going to be playing with a lot more leads. And if Bryce Huff was able to get 10 sacks on the 7-win Jets team that barely had any leads all year long, imagine what this man could do if he was on the team in 2024. 14 sacks, 15 sacks, 16 sacks, who knows? Who knows? So let's go through a couple of key pieces here. Then, plus, I also want to dive into the recent history of NFL tag and trades, and everyone goes, Paul, it's not that common. Shut up. Yes, it is. Actually, it's happened several times over the last couple of years, which we'll get into. But I'll explain why, because a lot of people are saying the same. Jared B., my gut says the same thing, and a couple other people believe he's going to leave. Yeah, there you go. From James, like button, hit it on YouTube. We appreciate it. A couple of reasons why I'm not feeling good at this current moment. And it's changed. At the end of the season, I said in my mind, you're 100% tagging Bryce Huff, because I'm a Madden guy. I'm a big Madden franchise guy. And I don't like losing players to the open market for no reason. Plus, Madden hasn't figured out comp picks yet, so you get nothing in that world. But even in our world, the only way you get him or get anything for him of significance is with the comp pick formula, which is basically a complicated formula of how much does your guy sign for to go to another team, and then how much do you spend, and then the numbers kind of go against each other, and beep, boop, bop, comp pick spits out. But by the way, they can't help you till 2025. You don't get that pick until next year, not this year, even if you lose him this year. But anywho, here's a couple of things. Rich Cimini on his podcast said this, quote, let me clear this up to all the Jet fans out there who think the Jets are going to tag Bryce Huff. I would be very surprised if that happens, because the projected franchise tag for a defensive end is going to be $23 million. As I said earlier, the Jets have cap restrictions this offseason. I do not see them devoting $23 million in cap space for a player who plays about 45 to 50% of the snaps. Now, the Jets could get back that cap space if they trade him, but ask yourself this. What team out there would want to give up compensation in the form of a draft pick, let's say a second-round pick, and pay an enormous contract to Bryce Huff? That was basically a rhetorical question because he does not believe that's going to happen. And he added that Huff is a terrific pass rusher, but he isn't an every down player. At least I don't believe he is. This is Rich Cimini. I don't think teams are going to give up huge money and premium compensation for a Bryce Huff. And let's go to Bryce Huff, who immediately after the season, he is asked the straight up question, hey, Bryce, would there be any kind of hometown discount for the New York Jets? Here's Bryce Huff. I'm not giving any discount, quote. I work too hard for myself and family and the people around me to maximize my earnings. I'm definitely open to every scenario and every team. I just want to do what's best for me at the end of the day. Does that sound like a player who's coming back to the Jets? I know. Not from, I'm open to every team in every scenario. No, they ain't getting a discount. I'm getting the most money I could possibly get. Plus, this was in a separate article, but he had a one-on-one conversation with Rich, and he told Rich something that's very important to him is getting more playing time to, quote-unquote, maximize his potential. So that's another one where you're like, hey, boy, that doesn't sound good at all in that case. So that part of it concerns me. But again, if I'm the Jets, here is what I would do if I'm running the shop. And then I'll answer some of your guys' questions. You have questions about this or just questions on the Jets in general. If I was the GM, here's how I work. I agree with Rich. I agree with Rich on multiple fronts. Number one, the Jets are limited cap space wise. Depending on the cap place you go to right now, the Jets are hovering somewhere between 16 and 17 million and $12 million, depending on the cap place you believe or trust or projected or whatnot. Okay. So they are limited cap space. They could not fit Bryce Huff and that franchise tag in right now. The moment, here's some more rules on the franchise tag. The moment someone place the franchise tag on Bryce Huff, they owe him that $23 million, whether he signs the tag or not. You have to have that money available. That's part of the NFL rules. So you would have to create enough space to have that money sitting there. Number one. Number two, as we're discussing this scenario, if I'm Joe Douglas, I'm working like hell to re-sign him. And Rich Cimini said that on his podcast. He said the Jets will try very hard to re-sign him before he reaches the open market. But think about this. If you're Bryce Huff, why in God's green earth would you sign with the Jets early? Why? Why would you? It doesn't make any sense, especially if he's quote-unquote trying to maximize his earnings. You want to know how to maximize your earnings? Hit the open market. And then 32 teams are bidding for your services, which also means whatever the number is only going to go higher if he reaches the open market. So this one gets you a little bit in funky town from that perspective. So what number would the Jets have to give where Bryce Huff is like, you know what? I'm cool not reaching the open market because the Jets gave me insert amount of money. To be honest, that number probably doesn't exist. So the only way the Jets can retain Bryce Huff or prevent him from reaching the open market is the franchise tag. So they're going to work like hell, quote unquote, to re-sign him. I don't think they can. So now we're in this scenario. If I'm Joe Douglas and I realize that I can't sign Bryce Huff long term, but I don't want to lose him for a comp pick in 2025, here's what I do. There are some events coming up that Joe Douglas needs to roll up his sleeves and get to work. The NFL Combine is one of them, where all 32 general managers are going to be centralized in Indianapolis for the Combine. If I'm Joe Douglas, I'm walking around, I'm talking to other GMs, and I'm saying, hey, would you have any interest in a 25-year-old pass rusher coming off a double-digit sack season? Would you? Would any of you be interested in that? And if someone was, you don't use sure. How many people Rich Cimini asked are going to pay $23 million for Bryce Huff in the franchise tag? That might be a little rich, but here's this. Use the franchise tag only as means to trade. It's not like, hey, here's a pass rusher for $23 million. No. The Jets can't trade him unless they tag him because technically Bryce Huff is not under contract right now. So use the franchise tag as a tool to trade him. But before you even do any of that, you talk to I'm making this up, the Cardinals. The Cardinals say, hey, we'd be interested to give you like a second round pick for Bryce Huff. But what you do is say, Cardinals, you could talk to Bryce Huff right now. We're granting you permission. Talk to him early, work out a contract extension with Bryce, and then what we will do is we will tag Bryce on the first day of availability to tag so we can trade him, and then we will immediately trade his ass to you, and then you agree to a long-term extension. Booyah! Done. Now the franchise tag number doesn't matter. You work all that out ahead of time. The legal tampering period, free agency, all that jazz is where you, legal tampering period, pre-free agency, and the combine. You work out all the trade details, so you just tag and trade and move them from there. That's what I would do if I'm running the shop. It doesn't sound like that's the plan from the greater sense of the New York Jets based on what we're hearing. But anywho, let me also give you guys some examples, because people say that, tag and trades don't happen that often. And actually, that couldn't be further from the truth. Over the last 5 years, there have been 5 players who have been tagged and traded in the NFL. And the most recent one is the one Jet fans have been begging about, Davante Adams. Yes, the Green Bay Packers tagged Davante and then traded him to the Las Vegas Raiders. The price was a first and second round pick. People say, again, I get it, Davante's different than Bryce Huff, and all these players I am about to mention are different. But just hear this out. And I will tell you, in all these scenarios, when a player was traded over and then signed a massive extension, Davante is one of those examples. He was tagged and traded to the Las Vegas Raiders. They gave up top 2 picks, first and second round pick to the Packers, plus paid Davante Adams a ridiculous contract. So it's possible. In 2020, the Jacksonville Jaguars franchise tag Yannick Ngakoue, flipped him to the Minnesota Vikings. The Jaguars got returned a second and a conditional 5th. Sign me up for a second and a conditional 5th. Okay, that's not bad. Did a couple of draft picks. That was back in 2020. There was no big term contract signed on that one. The Houston Texans tagged defensive lineman Jadeveon Clowney in 2019, quote unquote, solely with the intent of trading him. I wanted to make that importantly and abundantly clear. That's what I'm saying the Jets can do. They can tag him with the sense of trading him. Other teams have done it. The Texans did it back in 2019. They found a taker in the Seahawks. They received a pair of players, Jacob Martin, Barkevius Mingo, plus a third-round pick. So players and picks. According to the new CBA, apparently, you can't include players in these trades. It's a new addition to the CBA. So that part's a little bit of a bummer, but that's fine. I'd rather just draft picks anyway. That's just dandy. And then the other one I wanted to highlight was in 2019. The Seahawks and Chiefs flipped, who was that? Clark, and a third rounder to the Chiefs in exchange for a first, third, and a second. So these can happen. If the Jets decide to go in that direction, all I'm saying, there's a full article down below that you guys can kind of catch up on all these details on YouTube to check it out. The point is that tag and trades are way more common than you think. There've been 5 of them over the last 5 years, and most of them being defensive linemen. So the Jets have an actual blueprint to pull this off and make it happen. So again, if it's me, I'm trying to keep him, obviously, because I think he's an important piece to the puzzle. You have a lot of pass rushers, sure, but the more the merrier, especially when you're trying to go all in. But I understand you have cap restrictions, so you got to probably shift some of that financial investment from the defensive side of the ball to the offensive side of the ball if you're the New York Jets. Again, for me, I tried to keep him. But if I realized that I couldn't keep him, and sometimes that happens in a negotiation or a situation, you look at it, you're like, this just ain't going to happen. So let's tag and trade him. It's very common. It can happen. Let's make it happen. That's what I would do and work it out. I'm going to be honest, I'm just going to be really pissed if the Jets don't franchise tag him. They let him hit the open market. He signs a crazy deal with somebody, and then we're like, well, don't worry, you'll get a comp third-round pick in 2025. Yippity-doo-dah, Basil. What does it all mean? Didn't know I was going to get an Austin Powers line in there, but you catch my drift. Now let's get to some of your questions here, guys, or commentary. All right, let's see. Good morning, everybody. Todd, Jared B. Let's go to Steve Larson. We need to draft successfully a left tackle like Brick Ferguson to Brickshaw, baby. They're too expensive in free agency. Well, I mean, that's the thing in free agency in general, that obviously if you go through the draft, you get your own guys. They're homegrown talents. When you go to free agency, these are mercenaries. These are guys looking for money. So yes, it's going to be expensive. We'll have a video actually out on the channel after this live stream about a left tackle that the Jets are apparently potentially targeting in free agency. More on that later. Make sure you guys stay tuned to the channel for that. Phil says, I heard a take that said we should trade JFM maybe for a third and use some of that money to pay Huff. Could then get a big TT in draft. Just a thought to ponder. Yeah, this is another possibility. Again, because the Jets, we talked about it in a prior video last week, that the Jets are going to have to make some cap space, and there's a lot of different ways to do that. There's players you could extend, like DJ Reeds or Michael Carter's the seconds that can shift their cap number. You could trade a JFM because he'd be highly sought after. I think the Jets like him a lot, and he's underrated, but that could create some cap space with the trade, and then you get back compensation, plus you open up money potentially for Huff. That's another possibility. Connor Rogers talked about that, and it's really about the risk factor. So JFM is a high floor guy. I don't know if he's ever going to be a true double-digit sack guy for the Jets, but what he is versatile. He can play inside, he can play outside. He's a solid leader. That was one of those ones. Again, another waiver pickup, but again, the story's great, and he's still in his 20s. So there's a lot to like there. But that could be one of the tough decisions if you really want to figure out Bryce. Plus, you could either get a big DT or sign one. I just tweeted out this morning that the Jets were this close to signing Fletcher Cox of the Philadelphia Eagles last year. And one thing they could decide to do as far as that's concerned is make sure that they get someone of that caliber who's a proven player already from that perspective. He wanted to be here. It was this close. The Eagles thing was a disaster this year, and then he could come over and join the Jets. I met Fletcher Cox at a Mississippi airport. Nice guy. Really like Fletcher. So I'd love to bring him over. Good leader. They need depth. You don't know what's going to happen. Guys like Quentin Jefferson. Quentin's a big fan. All of that I would sign up for. Yes, sir. So another possibility. Good comment, Phil. Matthias, we need offensive line, wide receiver. We need production. Sure. Again, Mike Evans, you see last night, although he had a really bad night, but the Buccaneers move on. So wide receiver help, certainly offensive line. I think you need minimum 2 starters. Those are going to be your 2 tackles. And then a lot of people want to get rid of Lakin, but I don't think you should bite off more than you can chew. There's a lot you have to fix. To throw another hole on top of it is easier said than done. Let me pull this up for our next question just to make sure I have it, because we have a Bryce Huff question. Alrighty. Okay. Let's go here. My father chiming in. What was the sack totals before this year? Don't become too enamored with productivity during a contract year. Yes, the sack totals from a year-to-year basis are 2 sacks, 3.5, 10. But as I would highlight here for anyone that likes to bring up those numbers, here are his defensive snap percentages from those seasons. 30%, 51%, 20% and 42%. The 51%, you're like, hey, that seems like a lot. He played less games than he had in his entire career. He just started from defense perspective. That was a host of injuries for the Jets on the defensive line during that 2021 season. So he played more because they had no other choice. Those are the only games he started in his career. So my only pushback to the lack of statistical production for Bryce Huff is the snap percentages, and they're true. It's an honest stat that he doesn't play a lot. That's both the Jets' decision, actually solely the Jets' decision, quite frankly. And you would believe, so again, I reiterate, if he had 10 sacks playing only 42% of the snaps, he appeared in all 17 games. Imagine what he could have done if he played more. Hell, he only played 14 games last year, but that's not because of injury, folks. The Jets made him a healthy scratch for the first 3 weeks of the season. Sometimes I feel like the Jets don't even realize the own talent they have on the team. Bryce Huff, who ended up being a double-digit sack guy this year, they made a healthy scratch for the first 3 games. What are you doing? Unbelievable. So it's to be honest, it's less about the productivity. It's fine. They got 10 sacks. That's cool in a contract year. That's going to, if he reaches the open market, that's going to be good money, I'm sure, for Bryce. But it is all the advanced analytics beyond the sacks. If you go to pressure rate or quarterback hits or all these kind of advanced stats from PFF, he's up there. Bryce Huff, is up there with Micah Parsons. He's up there with Myles Garrett. He's up there in all the pressure rates, which are all the advanced analytics beyond the surface level sack stats, which is why I believe he's going to get paid an absolute bag in free agency. So it's not just a neighbor with the productivity. I think a lot of Jet fans were in love with this guy before the stats because they thought they knew what he was about. And I think if the Jets were a little proactive in that regard, they could have signed Bryce Huff to a long-term deal a couple years ago. Because when he signed as an undrafted free agent, he was under contract for 3 years at $3 million, not $3 million per, $3 million overall. Then last year, he played on the restricted free agent tender. This past season, it just happened. $4.3 million, a significant raise. The Jets could have stepped in at any moment and thrown him a bone. What is a bone? $10 million, $8 million, $7 million, which would have been life-altering money for Bryce. And then the Jets could have made that alteration, which I think could have made a tremendous difference, I think. All right, let's see. Could we bring back George Fant as right tackle on Houston? We'll see. I don't think George Fant's a big fan of right tackle. I know he's played a lot of right tackle for the Texans, and then when Tunsil has been injured, he's flipped back to left. I'm open to all options of finding ways to get people in. Let's see. If you want to keep him, you will have to tag him. Yes. Could put the bulk of our money in on a guy like T. Higgins, Steve Larson says on YouTube. But let's see if T. Higgins makes it to the open market. Sure, if he's a 24-year-old wide receiver, gets the open market, yeah, I'm all aboard. But let's see if he makes it there. I think a lot of these wide receivers will be franchise tags. Speaking of the tag, which is not ideal. Jared B says supposedly they had conversations to resign him during the season. I've heard back and forth. I've heard some people say yes, some people say no on that. So it's hard to really understand which side of the fence is really the truth. It's normally somewhere in the middle, I suppose. And then I see it here. Jared B., a new member of the Boy Green Super Fan Club. Thanks for the support, buddy. There's a lot of different ways you guys can support the show. Join the YouTube membership club if you guys like. I really appreciate that. YouTube Super Chats, those help. And quite frankly, the free way for all of you guys to join is by liking the video and hitting subscribe. But going this extra level, Jared, means a lot, man. So you'll have this special little logo every time you comment. We'll see it, brother. So thanks for the support. Really cool, man. Really cool. I love that. Way to join the team, baby. Boy Green Super Fan Club. Nice. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Melvin says, got to trade JFM to keep Huff. Okay. We'll see. Dakota says, Zach Wilson to Kansas City Chiefs soon. Again, that's been my gut for a while. That's where I think he's going to get traded. Andy Reid's a former BYU guy. I could totally see that. Brian, my concern is chatter and negative statements about the offensive staff, and the Jets will have to overpay for players to come in. I think everyone's going to have to overpay in free agency, but I get what you're saying, like Keith Carter's and stuff like that. But I think the thing that will help is Aaron Rodgers. They're like, oh, yeah, he's good, as long as they believe he'll be healthy, which, again, outside of this year, you'd have every belief that he would be. Johnny says on our YouTube channel, a couple more questions and we'll get out of here. Good morning, bro. Ham. So seeing the games this weekend, and I'm like, man, we're a quarterback away from beating the playoffs, which is why I can't wait for next season. I know some of you guys are down. Some of you guys are up. For me, I'm up. Aaron Rodgers on this team. I'm so freaking excited. Nearly half of the field of the AFC makes the playoffs. Get a ticket to the dance. Let's see what happens. 7 teams make the playoffs, folks. The Jets were 7-10. They were, whatever it is that 10 wins for the playoffs or 9 wins? What did the Steelers have? So, 10 wins, I think. So they're 3 wins away. Is Rodgers the difference in 3 wins? I would say so. Yeah. I would say that pretty confidently. So I feel pretty good about that. So just join the party, baby. Sergeant CVO, after watching these playoff games, Bowers doesn't look like a bad pick, that's for sure. Yeah, you're seeing some of these dynamic tight ends making plays. AAG Joker does not believe the Jets should trade Zach Wilson. Nathan says, we need to trade Zach Wilson to free up cap. I love all you guys. Everyone's all over the place. I'll tell you this. We will be discussing this in a new series coming up at 3 o'clock live every Tuesday and Thursday. We're going to assess every position on the Jets roster. They'll get their own episode. Today, the position is quarterback. So, guys, that video is already, waiting to go live. So you guys can check that out on my YouTube channel and see the live episode that's coming up at 3 o'clock. Myself and James Woody, we're going to assess every position on the Jets roster. We start with quarterback today. So we'll tell you who's under contract, the Zach Wilson trade or cut situation. We'll talk about that. Plus, we're going to tell you which free agent, veteran free agent quarterback, we're predicting which Jets quarterback will be signing, or which veteran quarterback, will be signing with the Jets this offseason. So keep an eye out for that. Looking forward to those episodes, and that's going to be a lot of fun. That comes up. We'll be back live at 3 o'clock. So, guys, make sure you check that out if you're listening live. This is January 16th, Tuesday. We'll be back for that. Paul Paul Sr., my father. Healthy scratch should tell you something. That the Jets are idiots. That's what it tells me. I don't think it's something the Jets knew. They tried to explain that it was a run defense thing. When you have a dynamic pass rusher, you find a way to make him healthy and active as one of your guys on the defensive line. So I don't think that gives the Jets coaching staff credence. His stats are helped by the remainder of the D line. Possible, sure. Okay. There's nothing I can say about that. There's no way to really prove that one way or the other. So it's hard to say that. Let's see. Nathan, trade CJ Mosley as well. I don't think there's a trade to be had there. If they cut him, they save $11 million. But I think the more reasonable centerpiece for the Jets is a renegotiation. Jeremy Fowler of ESPN joined me last year. And I asked him at the end of the interview, hey, can you give me any Jets nugget you have? And he went, man, I can't think of anything. And then we got off air. And as soon as we got off air, he's like, oh, I got something. I'm like, oh, okay. We're not live anymore, but go ahead and tell me. He said, the Jets and CJ Mosley, this is last summer, I've been talking about a contract alteration. And they've been talking about it for weeks, but nothing's happened yet. That's what Jeremy Fowler told me last year. It was off camera, unfortunately, but that's what he told me last year. I'm like, interesting. So, but they ended up not doing anything with the contract. So now we're here at this year. Probably best that they did not do one of those CJ Uzomah restructures, because then his money would keep getting pushed into the future. But I think that a pay cut situation could be happening. The Jets approach CJ Mosley and say, hey, we're going for it all next year. Would you take a pay cut for the team? And maybe he will. We'll see. All right. Jared B, thanks for the great content, brother. I appreciate it, man. That really means a lot. I appreciate that. And how about the Eagles getting stomped by the Bucks? Todd Bowles, baby. Yeah, apparently we never should have fired him. I'm kidding, sort of. But yeah, Todd Bowles. Good for him. And all the other former Jet guys that are in the playoffs. Good to see. Phil says, peace. Go Jets. By the way, Jason Kelce retires. Is that a prediction, or did that just come through? Let me go over to Schefter real quick, see if that did. I wouldn't be surprised. He was crying in the He's crying. Oh, he did. He did officially retire. There you go. Wow. I'm not surprised. Jason Kelce is an awesome leader and everything. He was crying last night. It's sad. And he made one more trip around the sun for this team. For them to fold like a used lawn chair is pretty sad. So that's it. I would have loved a couple of years ago. I tried to make the pitch, like, leave the Eagles, come to the Jets. It didn't happen. All right. Finally, these last two, and then we'll get out of here. Signed Buff to a 3-year deal, $36 million, fourth year option, and $5 to $10 million signing bonus. Not enough, William. I mean, we'll see ultimately when free agency numbers come out. I think he's making way more than $12 million a year. Carl Lawson, think about this. Carl Lawson, who's basically the same kind of player, but he never had a double-digit sack season. He was like an analytics guy. He had $15 million a year, and that was a couple of years ago. And premiums only increased for pass rushers. I'm going to say, if I had to project right now, I'd say Bryce Huff is anywhere between 17 and 19 million a year. That's my guess. On the open market, on like a 3 or 4 year deal. That's my guess. He's 25 years old. Those kind of guys don't hit the market often. Coming off a double-digit sack season, I would say there's a market increase on what Carl Lawson initially got, so it's got to be a little bit more than what he got. That would be my guess. Keep a player year too long, similar to Marvin Jones, Mo Lewis, and we lost James Ferrier. Yeah, it could be, but again, I just think he's a key leader on this team. I think the Jets love him, and they pair him up with Quincy. And plus, that would be another hole. We talked about a lot of the holes there on this Jets team. Wide receiver 2, probably need a wide receiver 3. You need a backup quarterback, probably need another tight end. You need an RB2. You need minimum 2 starters on the offensive line, maybe a third offensive line star if people talk about getting rid of Lakin. You have to fill the safety hole. 3 of your safeties are unrestricted free agents. Interior defensive line, Quentin Jefferson is set to be a free agent. Plus, you throw in linebacker. That's just another thing. And you've got limited assets from picks and cap space perspective. So maybe it will happen. That's one of the surprise cuts to create money, but I just think that's a lot to happen. Johnny says, so can we get Jason Kelce from retirement? Hey, you know what? Who is that? Ryan Khalil, we convinced out of retirement? Maybe. That could happen. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in for Boy Green Daily, a daily New York Jets video program, also an audio-only podcast. We'll be back live at 3 o'clock. We're assessing the Jets quarterback position. We'll talk Zach Wilson. Does he get cut? Does he get traded? And which veteran quarterback will sign with the Jets? We'll pull out the crystal ball and predict it for you coming up at 3 o'clock. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We love you, and we'll see you in a little bit. Appreciate you.